Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. The humanitarian gesture by the Department of International Relations and Cooperation to provide 50 million rand in aid to Cuba failed yet again when the Constitutional Court ruled on Tuesday that Dirco could not appeal an earlier decision against it. Dirco has explained that the money would have come from the African Renaissance Fund, which is based within the department to provide support for humanitarian crises. Rights group AfriForum had opposed Dirco's decision. Joining us now to tell us what the department plans to do next is Dirco Director General Zane Dangor. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. There's been a lot of questions, concerns, and even a matter ventilated in court. What's your plan around this? How do you plan to move forward?
Good evening. Just perhaps it's important for me just to stress that we did not express frustration at the Constitutional Court's decision. What we did was just to correct an impression that the court ruled on the merits of the case. In fact, all the court did was make a ruling that our application for direct access to appeal the judgment of the 22nd of March that AfriForum brought before the Gauteng Division on the High Court could not be ventilated at this stage in the court. The ruling by the court is very clear, and the wording actually talks to at this stage, which means that all the court is saying is that an appeal at the Concourt level is not yet, the case is not ripe to be heard at the Concourt yet, and essentially we would continue to pursue our appeal in the High Court, and if necessary, at the Supreme Court, and if we fail there, the avenue towards the Constitutional Court is still open to us. So we just thought we needed to correct that impression that the court had ruled on the merits of the case, and that was sort of framed in some media outlets. Mm-hmm. So, the matter is still ongoing, and we will continue with the review of the decision in the High Court, and we filed our papers to that intent.
So you say you'll continue to pursue the matter, which of course shows that you're rather adamant to ensure that you make this donation. This is a decision which has angered many South Africans. Perhaps let's go back a few steps. What's the rationale behind the 50 million rand decision?
So let's break it down in this way. So the matter that we're dealing with the court is not only about the decision to provide humanitarian aid as per our mandate through the African Renaissance Fund, where the fund was established to support countries in need, both in Africa and other developing countries. And Cuba did face a humanitarian crisis. A request was made. We approved that request, and it was interdicted. I think for us, what is key in the way we're taking up this in the courts is more the fact that the action by AfriForum essentially questions the ability of the executive to make foreign policy decisions, but also in some ways questions the ability of the Minister of Finance to make decisions around the budget. The money that was budgeted and was budgeted through parliamentary processes. The ARF is funded through a budget vote. This money was going to be used, and the intention was to be used essentially to support South Africa's foreign policy objectives, which means that the money would have been spent in furtherance of our objective outside of the country, engaging with foreign policy partners. And as much as we are concerned and we are extremely worried about the impact of COVID-19 on our economy, the hardships faced by South Africans, this is not an issue that detracts from the need for government to do that. Essentially, this is a different pot of money that is essentially used in the foreign policy space, and a decision was made to support a country in need.
So you say these are funds that support countries in need. Which other countries have been supported in the past, for instance? So
in the past, we've supported countries like Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and there's a whole range of countries in SADC, Madagascar, that has been supported through
to the tune of 50 million rand.
Well, I'm not sure what the exact amount is. Some of it could be equitable to 50 million rand. Some would be slightly less. But the objective is, the foreign policy objectives of South Africa was not, and the spending and the decision around this funds, in our view, wasn't meant to to use resources that could have been used in the domestic revenue dealing with poor and vulnerable people. We definitely support all means to support South Africa's poor and vulnerable and to support local hardship. This one was essentially a decision made out of our own policy mandate and the budget allocated for that.
Yeah, even still, this has still not, it still prompted South Africans to ask how, as their country is able to, how the country is able to do this while little is done to address the root causes of hunger back here at home. Would you agree that the timing may be a little bit off?
So let's look at the last 3 years. So last 3 years, the entire globe has been caught up in one form of disaster or the other, not excluding the impact of COVID-19. It was also a time of significant inter-country solidarity. South Africa has been a significant of solidarity of that nature. And so the timing was essentially within that context where reciprocity and solidarity was, what we do in as countries in supporting each other. And this was one of those decisions to support a country in need. Where you had a natural disaster compounding the impacts of economic blockades and also the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the timing of whatever we've done in this period is something that, we've been a recipient of as well. And in terms of our own approach, we have a strategy through the ARF to support countries in need in Africa and including other developing countries.
So looking at the timing, I'm not sure if I got that from you. Looking at the timing of this massive donation when South Africans are battling themselves and really battling with their own crisis, do you think that the timing may be a little bit off or perhaps not?
If you think about humanitarian support, one can't actually put a time frame to it, a specific calendar. Like I said, the entire globe, South Africa, the region was caught up in crises of one, a health crisis or a natural disaster. And this particular crisis emerged during that period, and a request was made to South Africa and other countries. And given the fact that we do have the mandate and the resources through the ARF to support countries for humanitarian purposes, we responded, positively to Cuba's request.
Yeah. And how are you hoping then you say you're going to pursue this matter, you're going to ensure that the funds do indeed reach Cuba. Why is it so important when it comes to South Africa and Cuba in terms of relations?
So I think in this case, I just spoke on the policy side. It's the fact that a request was made and we were interdicted. The court issue is now more about, in reality, the fact that the questions that will be dealt with in the court is the decisions made rational? The kind of approaches that have been taken by some of the governments by AfriForum questions the ability of the executive to make foreign policy decisions, and also questions the ability of the executive to make budgeting decisions. And that, I think, is actually more important at this stage than, almost stating that we are dead set on providing the 50 million. I think the case is now more about the principles about what the executive can or cannot do. Is the decisions rational? What's the role of the courts? What's the role of the executive? What's the role of the legislature? I think these are the important issues that this case turns up.
And, just as you and I are speaking here, I'm seeing that there is some record that the amount is perhaps a little bit more that government is planning to donate, that it's maybe now closer to 350 million rand. Is that accurate?
No, it's not. The 350 million speaks to historical loans that have been provided to Cuba, and Cuba has been repaying that. And I think we've dealt with that previously as well. I think it's a bit of a misdirection on that side.
Okay, very well. Also, perhaps very lastly, critics may argue that perhaps in the recent State of the Nation address, President Cyril Ramaphosa didn't prioritize food security and solutions to hunger here in South Africa. I mean, farmers, for example, have said that government's intervention in supporting the agriculture sector through a master plan needs perhaps a little bit more focus from the presidency and other departments when it comes to addressing South Africa's own concerns. How does that, relate with you as you are eager and looking to pursue this matter to ensure that the funds do reach Cuba, with really considering what the situation is here at home in South Africa with the many families that are going to bed hungry?
Sure. I think that, personally, I've been involved in looking at how to ensure that the right kind of social security budgets have been in place right from the beginning of the pandemic, working with the presidency and others. So we're quite concerned, the minister, myself, and the department as a whole, quite concerned about how we need to ensure that we have proper budgets to provide what South Africa needs. And I think that is a separate argument from the kind of discussions about what has been budgeted through the fiscus for the use by Dirco for the ARF to support other countries in need as well. It's a different set of considerations, and that pot of money doesn't detract from the need and the importance of government as a whole to ensure that we have the right set of policies and budgets to support the poor.
Very well. Let's perhaps leave it there for now. Of course, looking at the validation and perhaps the reasons behind the donation to Cuba.